105.5 Hits FM. It's Taylor B along with you. And it is time for another edition of Tractor Talks. And this edition is brought to you by Durham Kubota. You can visit them online at durhamkubota.ca. And joining me today is Trevor Cox. Hey, Trevor, how's it going?
Pretty good, Taylor. How are you?
I am doing well. Can you believe that rainstorm we had just a little while ago? Wild.
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere, but you know what? We needed it. Any farmers that have their winter wheat planted already, conditions are still remarkably dry. So that seed in the ground, those fresh seedlings that are poking through, I'm sure they did nothing less than appreciate that moisture.
Really, even if it's torrential like that, it's still beneficial?
Absolutely, it is because, like I say, any moisture is good moisture.
Oh,
right?
I think
Now,
they drown.
of course, as we found in the spring, you can always have too much moisture. But you know what? Our water table and our ground moisture is so depleted right now because of the drought we had in July, August, that yes, a rain like that, every plant that hasn't ripened up or that is still trying to grow, they're going to take a big gulp of water today and they're going to be happy.
Well, that sounds like a positive to me. I was pretty happy my car was washed. I'm not going to lie.
Very good.
I was looking at it going, yeah, this is good for me. Now,
Yeah.
Fall harvest is coming up. So walk us
It
through
is.
what happens during fall harvest.
Well, lots of guys are just kind of getting rolling now. So fall harvest, farmers are harvesting their corn and their soybeans. And much like Garrett said last week there, most guys are kind of starting to chip away at their corn silage right now. So that's taking the entire corn stalk and chopping it into inch to inch and a half pieces, basically making what I like to call a nice little cow salad full of sugars and starches.
Oh, funny.
And most guys, once they get their corn silage done, then they roll into soybean harvest and winter wheat planting. And that is always followed up by the corn harvest. Corn harvest doesn't usually really get rolling until about the middle of October. It'll be late October this year because of the late start that we got. It kind of, when your summer's over, it feels like your life slows down. But for farmers, we're just kind of getting rolling with our last big push of the season. So we're busy guys this time of year.
And remind me again, what exactly is winter wheat? Is it wheat that grows during the winter?
Correct. So you plant your winter wheat now, and it gets established. It gets up out of the ground, and it gets itself established. And it will actually grow. It'll grow until the ground freezes up pretty much. And
Okay.
it will remain alive below surface, but on top it will actually lay itself dormant. And then once the weather warms up in the spring, it will, for lack of a better term, it comes back to life and it will take off and it'll grow, and then you harvest it in late July, early August.
Cool. So are you planting this across all of your crops for the winter, or do you just do it in a certain section? Is it to preserve soil, or how does this work?
Well, it is. It's, it works in all kinds of ways. Wheat has a very good biomass. Actually, I believe it's 60 to 70% of wheat's biomass is actually below the ground. So what that means is it has a very strong root system, which breaks up hard pans and breaks up soil and puts new biology into the soil. What most guys do is they take their soybeans and their corn silage off, and they put wheat on those acres because it's a rotational crop that you can make money off of, right? So most guys have a rotation. So for instance, on our farm, soybeans, corn, wheat, and hay. And you rotate all your fields so they get different biologies, they get different crops, they get different input management, and it all just creates the perfect cycle in a perfect world for your farming practices.
Cool. So it's a way to keep it active and alive, I guess. You need minerals in the soil to keep your crops growing.
That's right. And some fields, like we have a few fields that we like to put wheat on because it grows up, it'll be sometimes 2, 3, 4 inches tall come springtime. It will actually prevent erosion because of your root structure in the ground and your above surface plant. So when the snow is melting, for instance, down, say, a side hill, instead of washing the ground out and causing a big gouge out, the wheat will actually slow the water down, and it won't erode the soil.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question. What happens when you have a big thaw? I would imagine that plants are drowning in all the water.
Well, and again, yeah. So when you have a big thaw, as long as wheat is pretty hardy, like it has remarkably good survival instincts or strengths, I guess you want to call them. The only time a wheat plant really will die is if you get a giant thaw. Okay. And say there's a low spot in your field, and then all of a sudden, maybe for a couple of days, it drops below freezing again, and then it'll form like a big sheet of ice over top of the wheat. If it can't get oxygen, basically, if it's stuck below the water for a great amount of time, it will die off, and you will have winter kill. But as long as the plants, say even just the tips of the plants, are up out of the ice or up out of the water where they can get some air to them and they're breathing, typically they will survive. But again, one of the reasons, and there's various other crops. We have a farm where we planted winter rye.
Oh.
And we have a few different purposes for it. We planted it on a farm that is very soft soil. It's on a side hill. So in the springtime, when all that snow melts, that water is just going to all run right down the side hill, right?
Right.
And my theory is the rye will be tall enough and strong enough. It can run a little net front interference on the running water, and just kind of hold it back and hold all the soil into place.
Sorry, am I talking to Farmer Trevor or Bruins coach Trevor?
It's just, some cliches just go with, you can use them in various applications, right?
I love it. I absolutely love it. So how many versions of winter blank are there? Can you grow anything in the winter? Can you make winter corn?
No, because most plants are killed off. Like once it freezes up and you get that, what we call a kill frost. So, those mornings in late October when you wake up and, it's been below zero overnight and, you got to scrape your windshield off for the first time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
That will kill. It's the same as the flowers in your flower bed. That kills everything. But some plants, there is winter rye, there's winter barley, there's winter wheat. I'm sure there's various other ones out there off the top. Alfalfa and grass can survive the winter, of course, right?
Right.
But yeah, and some guys do it. We grow a lot of wheat. So one of the byproducts of wheat, of course, is the straw that you bale up after you combine it. So the combine separates the grain from the plant. So you ship the grain to market to be, blended into pasta or bread or flour or whatever. Our farming practice, we keep the straw. And that's what we use to bed cows up with in the barn to keep their stalls nice and dry and clean.
Right.
And then, like I say, some guys, it just goes back to their rotation. It makes for a good, healthy rotation.
Now, I have one last question on this before we move on to farm equipment. When it comes to the sheet of ice on your crops, now, you say they can't survive that long if there's a sheet of ice. What would happen if you went out and salted it?
I like where your head's at. And I guess depending on the dosage, you might be able to get away with it, but salt can be highly volatile on living crops. Quite often you'll see, if you see a house that is built beside a major highway,
mm-hmm.
and let's say they have young evergreen trees planted beside the road, a lot of people actually put burlap up around the tree, and that's because road salt will actually kill the trees. Like if it gets enough of it.
I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah. So, I like where your head's at. It might work.
I thought I had $1 million idea.
Back to the hockey coach thing. I could always run practice out there too, right?
Oh, yeah. You could definitely do that. That would be fun.
There you go.
Change it up.
Yeah.
Now,
for sure.
With harvest, obviously there's a lot of farm equipment on the road. And earlier in the year, Garrett was telling us that the MTO actually requires farm equipment to drive in the middle of the road and not on the shoulder. Is that still a thing?
Yeah, it is. And one of the things is I've had various altercations with drivers over the years. A lot of drivers think, well, why can't the tractor drive on the shoulder of the road? Well, it's highly unsafe because the shoulder of a road is not consistent. And what I mean is they can have sinkholes, they can have severe drop-offs. Tractor or a combine on the shoulder of the road, that is an extreme amount of weight on the shoulder of the road that the shoulder is not designed to handle.
Right.
It's very dangerous. Like you could be driving along with your tire on the shoulder of the road and the shoulder could give way And then what happens? Your piece of equipment, you're in the ditch. You could roll the tractor. It's highly unsafe to do that. And I've rolled a tractor before. I don't ever want to do it again. It's not fun. I got off very lucky. There's people that haven't got off lucky. But the fact of the matter is, yes, our equipment is over width. Yes, our equipment is slower. But it is just as safe for us to be in between the white and the yellow lines as it is a car. And driving on the shoulder is extremely unsafe.
Well, we wouldn't do it, so why should we expect you to do it in your tractor?
Well, exactly. And I mean, sometimes as a farmer, you have to, because your equipment, again, we run with over-width equipment, right? So we try to be as courteous as we can too, right? Like, we have to be on the road to get from field to field. We don't want to be on the road any more than we have to be, because it is extremely dangerous. And there's a lot of drivers that don't have the patience to sit behind farm equipment. If I had a dime for every vehicle that pulled out and passed me on a double solid line, I could retire from farming. But it's mind-boggling, because if you're following another car down the road, you would never dream of passing on a double solid line.
That's very fair.
And the other thing is the impatience of drivers. Again, we realize we slow traffic down. We realize we're way too wide for the road sometimes. Again, something that boggles my mind is we have mirrors. We see what's going on. We can see how impatient they are. They're pulling out, they try to pass. They come back in behind. They pull out, they try to... They won't sit behind a tractor for 5 minutes down the road, but they'll go and park in the Tim Hortons drive-through for 20 minutes for a cup of coffee. Does that make sense to you? Because it doesn't make sense to me.
That's a fair comparison there, and something I've never thought of before. And one thing that I like to point out is we live in farm country. We know when harvest season is happening. So I guess during this time of year, just allot yourself 5 to 10 extra minutes on your commute. Maybe you'll get lucky and not get stuck behind farm equipment, or maybe you will, and, you got to take the L. But I absolutely think we need to share the roads, and it is a safety thing. So I hope people will consider that moving forward.
I couldn't agree more. All we ever ask for is drivers' patience and understanding. We have a job to do as well. Unfortunately, our job depends on Mother Nature, and it's challenging for us. We don't want to be on the road any more than we have to. We try and do it as safely as possible. We just need cooperation from drivers.
I believe it. And on that note, Trevor, I think we should wrap up this edition of Tractor Talks. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch up with you in a couple of weeks.
Sounds great. You take care, Taylor.
You too. Bye-bye.